It was a really tense moment, and it turned out it was a very funny moment, at least in retrospect. It was the time I had to tell my CEO client that he was the problem with his company. Nobody else, him. And of course, it was obvious to absolutely everyone but him. You see, Peter, that's not his name. I'm most definitely protecting the guilty here. Peter had no idea, or worse, didn't care about the corrosive effect he was having on his people, and therefore, ironically, on the performance of his own company. Strictly speaking, in clinical terms, Peter was a raging jerk. You know them, right? He thought he was projecting a tough guy image, swagger and all, when in fact he was coming across as a toxic narcissist. And you know, we're learning something these days, and that is large numbers of young, diverse, highly mobile, highly talented people will not tolerate toxic leadership. Right? One can only hope those days are ending. And I'm, of course, confining my comments to the workforce. Ladies and gentlemen, despite decades of research and practice in shared leadership, and distributed leadership, and servant leadership, we come to one painful conclusion. The fish still rots from the head down. Whether we like it or not, that man or woman at the top of the organization still matters most, by far, no matter how much we want to distribute and decentralize leadership. So, in that context, isn't it time for a fundamental re-examination of what it means to lead well in the 21st century? I think so. And I think it starts with this premise. To be an effective leader means, or should mean, to be an effective human being. Well, no kidding, right? Seems obvious. Simple. Except in its mind-numbing complexity and seeming impossibility. It means leaders and people who aspire to leadership positions who understand that they are imperfect and don't work overtime to hide those perfections all the time. In fact, are being seen as working on those imperfections. It means people in leadership positions who understand the raw power of what we too often dismiss and deride as soft skills. Soft skills? Are you kidding me? Where I come from, and perhaps where you come from too, the soft skills are the hardest skills of all. Self-awareness, self-regulation, communication, and collaboration, for example. Now, we need leaders who, flight attendants might say, see to their own emotional developmental needs before they ever dare see to the needs of fellow employees and business partners in the seats next to them. This is not, however, a popularity contest. I'm not here to talk about being nice. I mean, it would be nice to be nice. But no, instead, I'm talking about cohering and connecting highly talented people in today's workforce. But it's a lot of hard work. It requires that, looking in the mirror and saying, are we up to the task? Daily, if you have the great honor of leading people. Daily, a self-examination of that kind. You know, we look to the leaders of the past with great reverence. And that reverence, of course, is born both of myth and reality, but for sure, Washington and Lincoln and FDR faced epic challenges. The titans of industry built our commerce, and the so-called men of letters developed world-class universities. We know that. But Thomas Jefferson didn't face a lot of pressure, unrelenting calls for transparency. Henry Ford could profit handsomely despite his jaundiced views on race and religion. Right? Then Harvard President James Bryan Conant didn't spend much time thinking about women in the workforce of the Me Too movement. And Generals Eisenhower and Marshall didn't lose a lot of sleep over the role that social media might play in compromising the D-Day invasion. You know, you can get a doctorate in this stuff. And of course, it raises far more questions than it answers. I guess that's a good thing. But at times, it feels like getting a doctorate in mystery writing or fog or black holes. Yes, folks, we have a great distance to travel to understand what it's going to take to develop and sustain effective leadership for the 21st century. But don't get me wrong. There are many great leaders out there. They're in the room here today. We've heard from them. They're in healthcare and teaching and the military and the ministry. They're in the arts. And if you look hard enough, yes, they're still in business and sports and even politics too. I think what they represent, the greatest of them, is a distinction we don't make well in our society. And that is the profound difference between real leaders who hear that calling, who understand the art and science both of effective leadership, and those who just happen to occupy leadership positions, which in my theory, contention, is the majority, because they happen to be good at surgery or finance. We don't yet have a profession called leadership outside the military. Real leaders, and those who just happen to occupy leadership positions. I also like to think these great leaders walk what I call the L path. Quickly go through 4 L words today that I think inspire the greatness in us all in leadership terms. First is learning. Now, we hear all the time that effective leaders are great teachers. Well, of course they are, but it's a two-way street. Effective leaders have to be great lifelong learners. And more importantly, they have to be seen as learning from their people. It's like my friend Maria. I watched her in staff meetings, and where appropriate, she would say, you know, that's a good idea. I hadn't thought of that. I like that. Let's plug it into the next meeting or the plan, whatever it might be. Her employees beamed with pride. In their new book, General Marty Dempsey and the Berkeley scholar Ori Braffman say that learners lead to ask the right questions and learn to admit what they don't know. Leaders who stop learning stop leading. One of my favorite chefs, Dominique Crenn of Atelier Crenn in San Francisco, considers her kitchen a learning laboratory, and she's constantly asking of herself and her team, why not? Who says? And what if? Now, there are many obvious reasons for leaders to learn, but maybe one of the most powerful, albeit subtle ones, is that it makes them magnetically humbler in the eyes of their people. Humility is very attractive in the right dose. I think we all grow tired of the standard issue know-it-all jerks out there. Because I think we realize that the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. All right, next step on the L path, laughing. Are you kidding me? Laughing? Where did he come from? Laughing? Leadership? This is no laughing matter. I'm not talking about comedy. We have plenty of leaders and comedians, in leadership positions. I'm talking about humor. Humor very much in the sense of Mark Twain, how Abe Lincoln used humor to manage his team of rivals, right? Let me tell you quickly about my old boss, Bill, another name that's been changed. CEO of a gigantic corporation. I was young. I was afraid of Bill. I didn't give him the advice he so sorely needed. I could have gone in multiple directions right there. He would have these employee town meetings and literally sometimes pontificate from on high. There was this balcony arrangement. And it would have made Eva Perón on the balcony of the Casa Rosado blush. And just once, instead of feeling he had to answer every question, if he just said something like, you know what, Sarah, I don't know the answer, but can you get your team and meet with me this week? We're going to figure it out together, and then we're going to come back here and dazzle everyone in this group with our collective brilliance. Well, Sarah would have followed him anywhere, and so wouldn't I. And yes, maybe that's a gift, but how do you know until you try? Right? Let's move to losing. Losing. This is America. We don't lose. It's all about winning. Losing is such a powerful tool of leadership and of learning as well. all the great military leaders wanted to know who among their admirals and generals lost. Well, they don't want people, habitually losing, but they want to know that you learn the lesson from losing. Because we know that it's hubris and arrogance on the battlefield that costs a lot of lives. Just ask General George Custer, just ask General William Westmoreland. If we are to lose, we need to learn from the loss and embrace the kind of humility that loss brings with it. Now, going back to our old friend Chef Kren out there in San Francisco, it's important for us to do things that don't work. You put them in the drawer and go back to them later. It's life. You need to make mistakes and learn. Oh, yes, and somewhere under that Emperor Palpatine hoodie, Bill Belichick knows the lessons he learned from his failures, some would have it, as head coach of the Cleveland Browns. And there's this little thing called science and innovation. It's based on losing. It's based on failure. It's called the scientific method. It's called experimentation. You try something, it doesn't work, you learn from it, you try it again, and maybe, just maybe, you change the world through a series of managed losses. Right? Okay. Now we're coming to the last step on the L path. In so many ways, living is the L path destination, the summation. It's the Plato's payout for a leader's life well examined, if he or she dares to examine their lives. Look, we know that this country is very, very good at developing all of us in our professional and technical silos. We're real good at that. We know how to produce surgeons and lawyers and financiers and dentists and basketball players. You name the profession, we probably do a very good job at it. And of course, that's a point of being proud. And it's the price of admission for anyone who purports to lead people in those professions. But that's not the problem. The problem is with the raw, irrational messiness of human nature, and that the leader, she or he, needs to see that as their primary task, human engagement. And it ain't pretty. It's real hard. But it's never going to work if you don't accept that as the task. So while we are great at the boxes, we're lousy at the arrows of emotional intelligence and the soft skills that connect these boxes. Again, communication, collaboration, and so on. Our schools do a wonderful job in the boxes and a horrible job on the arrows. And we know how the lack of EQ and the lack of soft skills corrupts the performance of those boxes time after time after time. Because we have yet to figure out that leadership is itself a profession. It's not just because you're a great dentist and now you're in charge of 20 dentists, somehow you're going to be a leader. What training have you? Outside the military, we really don't have institutions that require us to think in these terms, to be and play our role as the arrows, the connective tissue that makes it all work, that is engaged with life and living itself, that uses the lived experience to inform and inspire oneself and others. IQ is hard, granted. Mechanical engineering is hard. I'm pretty clueless on that subject, but I'm glad it works. EQ, emotional intelligence, is so much harder. I think sometimes we dismiss and deride the soft skills because we're uncomfortable with them, because they're mushy, and it's hard in some ways to measure them, at least in the short term. But like you, and it's such a shame, I've seen so many situations where boards of directors and other hiring authorities let people in leadership positions, I'm not necessarily talking about leaders, people in leadership positions fester too long without offering them the help that they need or getting rid of them. I mean, I literally see 2 or 3 years go by before some of us said, this just isn't going to work. Let's get this person help. That's another way of not appreciating the dynamism and the contributions that these soft skills and emotional intelligence in our walk together down the L path comprise. If the IQ of mechanical engineering is hard. The EQ of actually leading hundreds, if not thousands of people in a several-year project to build a bridge is so much harder. And I'm not sure we have a refined appreciation of that yet. Employers tell us all the time they're satisfied with what they get from colleges in terms of the graduates in all the technical and professional areas. Look, they're fine at chemistry, they're fine at accounting. Besides, we're going to train them our way anyway. They tell us singularly that the failure is with college graduates who don't know how to collaborate, don't know how to write, don't know how to communicate, don't know how to critically think and problem solve. Nobody tell them, but I think that's called the liberal arts. Yeah, one of my great frustrations is I don't see enough leaders in the liberal arts saying, damn it, what are you talking about? You're telling us this, and we're providing it. Otherwise, your people are going to read you like a book. I don't know about you, but the woman in the tangerine blouse there scares the living daylights out of me. She can see right through me. They smell inauthenticity a mile away. And people somehow think they're getting away with it. No, what happens is they leave in a year. But that's when their body leaves. Their heart left 6 months before that. The best parts of their brain left 3 months after. You know what I mean? Your heart leaves first, then your brain, and then your body. How do we calculate that? How do we assess the cost of lousy leadership? I can't find it on the income statement. COLL, cost of lousy leadership. Innovation lost. Connections failed. Spirits squashed. Is this asking too much? Yeah, it is. But is all of this anything less than what we need today? No. You know, I hope someday, in the not-too-distant future, we'll look back on these times because we will have embraced the true merit of leadership and we'll say, you know what? That was then. This is now. This is how we lead in the 21st century. Thank you.